Hey everybody, we are back for another episode. Whoa. It's Chris Bottger's Album Club, and I'm Chris Bottger, and we'll be doing two different albums randomly selected from a list, as usual. Alright, today with me I have Ben.
I'm starting with the man in the middle.
Matthew,
Your butt is mine.
and of course, hopefully not the person that comment was aimed at, Fan.
Gee, I should hope not.
I'm sorry, I accidentally almost called you Matthew after saying that, and I was like, what? Alright, y'all ready to hear what today's two albums are?
Yeah.
This should
Yeah.
be a fun one. We are going to be doing, of course, the viewer will already see what albums we're doing, but you all can't, so you're going to be getting to hear this pairing for the first time. The albums we are doing are The Heliocentric Worlds of Sun Ra by Sun Ra and Cowboy by Beyonce. And before anyone asks, it seems to be kind of hard to find the Heliocentric Worlds of Sun Ra on Spotify, but I have found it is on Spotify, so I'm also going to be providing a link to that in the chat for you all. But yeah, now we're going on to initial impressions of a very strange pairing. Ben, what are your first thoughts on these two albums going into?
Phil, we listening to Part 1. Okay, that's
Part 1. We're doing Volume 1. The listing I got, the submission didn't specify. I assumed it meant Part 1, though, because Part 1 was originally, apparently, just titled The Heliocentric Worlds of Sun Ra, and only reissued with the Volume 1 moniker after Volume 2 came out. So, if you have it with no volume number next to it, it means the original one, from what I can tell.
So I have listened to a little bit of Sun Ra one time back, not last August, but August before last, oddly. But I don't remember what album that was, but it is very much jazz, and, yeah, it's an avant-garde jazz album. From what I remember from the Sun Ra I listened to, it was pretty good, but I don't remember what it was, sorry. We have done jazz on here before, though. Including some very long and ambitious jazz work. This is not nearly as long. This is only 35 minutes. But, I'm familiar with it. Cowboy Corner is from the past year. It's Beyonce's Cowboy album. I have also heard it. It is definitely well, I guess I shouldn't say my thoughts yet, but it's Beyonce's Cowboy album. It has a cover of Jolene on it, famously. But, we will get into that. Well, there's a lot to say about Cowboy Carter, for sure. But, and his context is also very interesting. So we will get into that in a lot more depth, I'm sure.
Matthew.
I have not heard of the heliocentric world of Sun Ra. Amon Ra 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 Ra
Ga.
Ra 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 Ra. Although I do love me some jazz. As for Cowboy Carter, I have heard this album. I would say I'm a fan of Beyonce. I know plenty of people, certain people included, that are like more massive fans of Beyonce than me. But I have like quite enjoyed her recent uh, body of work since probably the album 4, and um, and like this is her trilogy of albums that are basically sort of reclaiming certain genres that have uh, black influence to them. And I was meaning to re-listen to this album one of these days. So yeah, I will. I will look forward to re-listen to it.
fan.
So, I guess I'll start with Beyonce. I've heard some of the big hits, obviously, like Single Ladies. I listened to Lemonade for the class I was in, and I personally just did not enjoy it at all. Um, it wasn't my thing. I heard her halftime performance at the Netflix game. I believe that was the Texans game, Texans and Ravens, where it was promoting this album, so they played some of these songs from it. I heard Jolene. I've heard the original many times. Uh, and it's. I mean, it's a cover of Jolene. I mean, I guess that's about all you could say. So this is going to be an interesting one. Saga. I have listened to quite a bit of Saga. I am a big fan, especially of this era. This was, I believe, around the time he was, well, he was always saying he's from a different planet and whatever, but this is kind of in that realm. This is like the hardcore, avant-garde, bizarre, free jazz stuff that I am obsessed with. That kind of music. So this is completely right up my alley. I have heard this album before, obviously. Okay, I actually, whenever I actually had to listen to Lemonade, for the class, this is whenever I was really entrenched in listening to a lot of Sunglass, so you can see why I may have not really cared for a Beyonce album, whenever this was pretty much all I was listening to at the time. Uh, so this is very much music that I enjoy, and I'm extremely excited to revisit.
Alright. Well, going on to me, until the ONG spat out this pairing, I had never heard of Sun Ra, although I did, obviously slightly before we filmed, literally right before we were filming, I did a quick Google search to try to figure out, to try to find the album on Spotify and make sure, since it's something I'd never heard of, to make sure it actually was on Spotify, and that's where how I kind of figured out about the naming conventions and how there was this first one without a volume number, and then there was the Heliocentric Worlds of Somewhere, Volume 2, and then I think there's a Volume 3 at least as well, I heard, but I don't really know anything about that. I had literally, until like yesterday or something, I had never even heard of Sun Ra, so it's jazz. The only really jazz album I think that's like straight jazz, or well, not exactly straight jazz, but jazz. I mean, more than just jazz rock. Was we did do, of course, Miles Davis here a while back. I don't have a huge amount of experience with just regular jazz. I mean, just like really brainy old sea jazz, but it well, we'll see. It's not exactly my thing, but we'll see if I like it. As for Cowboy Corridor, I have heard this album before. Several times, I think. At least twice, including back really right when it first came out. Because it was like, people are mad that Beyonce did a country album because she's black. It's like, well, good reason to listen to it. I'm sure it will piss those people off that I've done, streams. We want it to do good. But I listened to the album also just to see how it was. Beyonce doing country was kind of just an interesting proposition. An interesting thing to listen to just in general, just like, it was a concept I couldn't refuse. I had to listen. And so I have listened to the album before. I've already formulated some thoughts. It has been a little while. I mean, the album came out like February or something, I think, and it's now January of the next year, so it's been a hot sec, but I am quite familiar with the album, so that's basically just my thoughts going into it. Big blind spot on Sun Ra, but pretty good field of view when it comes to Beyonce and this particular album as well. So, very weird. This is I actually believe this has surpassed also a record for um, length of time between albums. Or previous record was Otis Blue versus Tame Impala's Comments. That was 65 in 2015, I think. This is like 66 to 2024. So instead of being like 50 years, it's now like 58 years. So very, very big gap in time period and also style between these albums. So yeah, that's certainly that's part of my perspective going into this. I guess is just that's something I think that's cool to think about. So yeah, I think we now should probably go on to the albums and listen to them and be back with our thoughts on them. Alright, we were back and we've listened to the albums. So, the first album was The Heliocentric Worlds of Sun Ra by Sun Ra. In this case, we were just doing Volume 1, as I explained last time. And we, as usual, will start with you, Ben. What were your thoughts on this album?
I thought that this album was quite good. I had heard it before. Once I saw this, it was like, yeah, I've heard this before. And I listened to it a couple times for this. It was very good, relaxing music, good for walking on. It's jazz. I thought especially the use of percussion on it was quite strong. Like, I found that to be the most interesting part. But it was altogether a very good jazz, experimental jazz album. Its form is very interesting, very rich, very textured. That being said, usual discussion topics we have for these albums, like, what do you think about the lyrics? Obviously not, but like, what do you think about individual songs? I mean, the songs are distinct, but it's kind of hard for me, especially as someone who's not well versed in the jazz literature. Like, this has been a problem I've ran into several times on this show, so maybe I should get better on that. And I'm sure Fan can compensate for this quite a bit, but I think that the textual, etc., the use of almost like a negative space in some of the older tracks was quite interesting, but I can't really articulate it very well. So I will leave that to Fan. And maybe Matthew if he has some thoughts.
Alright, well, up next, we're moving on to Matthew. Matthew, what were your thoughts?
I thought this album was quite good. Um, I think this is very much well listened to. If you listen to it as a whole, it's like a symphony of sorts. So it's kind of hard to judge, uh, judging this album on technically on a track by track basis. Although like all the tracks that are in this album are quite good. I think my favorite is probably the Cosmos of Heavenly Things, and also Other Worlds. But mostly, I'm just gonna leave it to Fan because he is most knowledgeable in this genre of music. But yeah, I thought it was quite good.
Okay, we are going on, of course, to Fan, as Matthew said. Thank you, Matthew. Fan, it is your turn. What were your thoughts on this album?
Well, that's a lot of pressure. You guys are both like, "Hey, we'll let him talk about it." Which is something I have been pretty much waiting 10 years for. Which is why it's so awkward that it's really weird for me to discuss this album in a sense because no, I am the musician here. But I could sit here and break down at like little things that they're doing, what they're doing, how the drums are and whatnot. But I almost feel like that's to the detriment of this album. This is total improvisational music. This is really stuff that's coming from deep within oneself. This is music that's coming from really the inside. And this is you showing who you are. I feel like I play improvisational music. For me, it can take a while to really get good playing with other musicians. So this is going to be kind of personal thing as opposed to a review of the album, but you'll see where I'm going with this. From playing jazz combos and stuff, I find it harder, and I play in a Grateful Dead cover band, which of course is total improvisation at moments too, when you get totally out there and do whatever. Um, when you play with new people, I find it hard to play as well as you can for the reason of there's a very personal element to it. You're very much bearing who you are on a very deep level in improvisational music. In stuff like this, it's not just notes that's coming from who you are. You show your personality, and it takes a while to get there. And these guys, I know some of them have played with each other for a while. I'm not sure about everybody, but with an album like this, it almost is detrimental to discuss. This is an album that really needs to be experienced. It needs to be heard. You need to put on some headphones, put on a good stereo system, and just space out and listen to it. Because sitting around and just being like, oh, listen to the way they're playing this minor third over this major thing or whatever, there's no real point, because that kind of goes against the spirit of what this album is. And now, with that said, this is an excellent album, and it is something that you definitely should listen to. It's very potent. I'm not sure if it really reaches some of the heights of things, maybe like the double quartet on that Coleman record, which is one of my favorite jazz albums ever. I would definitely put that higher. That's a bit freer. That's total improvisation outside of just you know, hey, you're gonna solo at this point, and then this guy's gonna solo at this point. But other than that, no rules, no restrictions. Was this? I believe there is some compositional element to it, which is great, because this is incredible. One thing I will talk about is this is a very percussive album. Uh, it's not drum beat like normal music, although there are moments, but I find the percussion to be a really major element throughout. There's one thing I will speak on. Um, but I was thinking, because, we have the Beyonce album, which has very easy to talk about, and this album that's extremely difficult to talk about. So it's a very interesting combination of records. So I'm not necessarily abstaining from discussion, but I think this is an album that's better experienced than told what it is. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm sorry to the people to both Ben and Matthew, who were like, oh, we're going to let him discuss it. I'm just kind of like, I'm just going to talk about myself and then say I can't talk about it. Oh, I want you, so before we move on to Chris, not leave, I want you to step back from the guacamole dip. I want you to put the chicken fingers down, turn your television all the way up, and listen to the Heliocentric Worlds of Sun-Ra, Volume 1.
Thank you, Fan, and also thank you, Matthew, for that beautiful insight. As for me, I don't know if there's a huge amount I can say. This isn't exactly, as you know, my style of music. I did like it well enough. Probably need to listen to it again, or I've already listened to it several times. But I did generally like it. I didn't like it as much as the other jazz album we did a while back, Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, but I did like this. I will say also, after we listened to this, after I listened to Spotify auto-played Tapestry from an Asteroid by Sun-Ra from his album We Travel with Spaceways. That's not a song of the album we're actually doing, but that song, that was really good. I just, how often do we get to discuss Sun-Ra? So I figure while we're discussing Sun-Ra, I better mention it, even if we're discussing a different Sun-Ra album. So, just want to get that out there. That song, if you're just wondering, somebody doesn't want to commit to full album and listen to just something from him, that it's just one song. Now that's a pretty short song too, only 2 minutes. But Tapestry from Asteroid, that's a good one. Sorry if I'm rambling off topic, but as for the Heliocentric Worlds of Sunhwa, it was good. I liked it. Fan, I think in a lot of ways is kind of right. Can't really describe it exactly here. I do feel like I probably liked it less than everyone else who's gone before me, but I did like it, so. And certainly I think this is going to be very much an apples to oranges comparison. Even if you have a very definitive thought on which album you like better, it's still a very apples to oranges comparison. Sunhwa versus Beyonce, it's not very similar, really, in terms of style at all. So, we are now moving on to Beyonce. So, the album is Cowboy Carter. That's her most recent album. As of the time of filming this, we're going to start with you, Ben. What are your thoughts on this album?
This is also a very good album, as I say at the beginning of most albums. Anyway, I thought that Cowboy Carter was a really, really good album. I really like many of the songs on here, including the first song, American Requiem, Blackboard, 16 Carriages, Protector, Texas Hold'em, which is kind of a generic answer for what the best song of this album is, but I kind of lean towards it anyway. That is a very generic answer, and I know it. Body Gold, that's a really good song. I would say Daughter was a pretty good song. Most Wanted was a really good song featuring Miley Cyrus. Didn't really care for Post Malone that much, but I do like Post Malone's song from the Spider-Man movie. But I mean, the second half does start to kind of trail off, though. She does do a cover of Chuck Berry's "Oh Louisiana," which is pretty good. But trailing off here was pretty relative, right? It's very relative to the rest of the album. So I think that all those songs I listed are really good. There was this like kind of almost Freudian thing about this album. I mean, it's not literally that, but dealing with like whole relationship to her parents, especially to her father. She's like, I'm not my father, but if you make me mad, I will be. Or like, I heard my father lying. Like, there's like more of that. This is actually a lot more of a psychological album than not any of Beyonce's albums. There was, of course, the Lemonade. This is a lot more of a psychological album than a lot of her most famous work, Lemonade, of course, except. Because, like, what is Beyonce known for? She's like this powerful figure. She's Queen Bee, right? She's on Single Ladies, you know. You didn't put a ring on it, so now I'm single. If you cheat on me, I'm going to, like, destroy you. Oh, but she's powerful. That's the defining characteristic of Beyonce. She's powerful on this, too, but it could be, yeah, it is more tempered in here, and I just somewhat wonder why she's returning to this more psychological style. To give some context to people that don't know what I'm talking about. So, on the album Lemonade, Jay-Z had some affair with somebody. It's not clear at all who that was that he had an affair with. She just had Becky with the good hair. That ends up returning this album too, which is kind of odd, right? Because this is like Beyonce's like moment of weakness. Right? Beyonce is the person who's supposed to crush, you know, men who betray her or whatever, and then didn't. She just reconciled with him, and is still reconciled with him, and he's actually on the song about this on this album, albeit only through hand clap. But there was like a lot more weakness in this album than I expect. Well, I expected prior. This is not actually my first time listening to it though. Not for the album club, but prior to my listening to it originally, there was a lot more vulnerability on thinking through her whole relationship to her father. And then, I mean, famously, her cover of Jolene. Now, of course, her cover of Jolene is this very Beyonce thing in many ways. Like, she's the tough, powerful queen bee in it. Like, unlike the original Jolene. Right? The original Jolene, Dolly Parton is this very weak figure in it. Right? I beg you, please don't take my man. It seems to be just this irresistible thing happening that Jolene can change, but neither Dolly nor her man can really do anything about it. They're almost passive in it. In this, of course, is Beyonce threatening Jolene. And then declaring that she'll stand by her man, by reference to that other song. But he'll stand by her. But it's this. I mean, it's just weird that last post is send up sexism in country music, which I don't blame her for. And then but the deal returning to, and Dolly's actually the person who vocalizes this in this, as opposed to Beyonce in her opening. But, like, this has to do with that again. Why is Beyonce returning to that? Why is Beyonce returning to, like, her relationship with her father? Like why is she meditating on that, more than she usually does? Why is she... I mean, some of it, I think, is because of her reception in Nashville. Even prior to this, of course, her reception in Nashville. The previous time she tried to cross over with just a song. Did not go very well for her. I mean, it was very successful because of course it was. But it did not go very well in Nashville. There was rumors that sort of people walked out when she visited CMA that year. It's bad. Obviously, the reception of this album in Nashville was also bad, which is obscene and I think fairly obvious why it was. Which anyway, I mean, even if you don't think this album is great or whatever, the way Nashville treated it by ghosting it and acting like it didn't exist is. And then you've seen all the comments about Shabuzi recently, and I'm not even that big fan of Shabuzi's song. I find it like kind of mid. But in terms of like rooting for him against Nashville, I absolutely root for him against Nashville. And he is on this song, on another song that I didn't really care for, which was Spaghetti. It is not very country, actually, which is not that big of a deal. Even if it has a pop country single Lyndon Mortel on it. It's opening. It is kind of more of a aggressive hip hop song, which is fine, but I also don't really know why it's on here. I mean, Spaghetti Western, I get why it's called that, but I don't know. It did feel kind of tonally dissonant. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of grappling with her relationship to the South. Her relationship to the South. She'll be like, I'm just that girl from Texas, or like talking about Louisiana, etc. Being like, I am actually from the South. I am actually a person who enjoyed country music as a child. Beyonce's not associated with that. She's associated with R&B and pop. And she's like, I am related to that, and that's true. It's true that she is from the South. She clearly, I mean, in some ways, this album is filled with attempts to try to like legitimize that. Which is also kind of odd for Beyonce, but is a product of how Nashville is, right? It has Willie Nelson on here, Dolly Parton, and Linda Motel, as like people endorsing her, plus some lesser known country artists. Well, Shabuzi is now quite well known, but it wasn't when this came out. A few weeks later, yes. To try to support them too. And by that we'll specifically talk about especially black country artists. There are now black country artists, most notably King Brown, that are successful, but they're still really bad. In terms of racism. So that's, I think, one is she's already starting this album in this kind of position of odd vulnerability relative to this genre, which takes a number of forms throughout this album. But then, secondly, that that position of vulnerability she uses to leverage some of her other psychological issues. I thought the issues, not meaning like mental illness here, but like questions of her relationship with her father, her relationship with her husband, her relationship with her husband's affair with the with Becky with the good hair. Um, Again, which I found to be a very interesting move. I think that makes the album stronger, not weaker. But more broadly, Beyonce is just very good at what she does. This is a very good album. It's well produced. She's obviously extremely great at singing. Billboard recently put her as the top pop star of the 21st century, and that seems pretty purely true to me. Like, she does lots of different things on this album. She did, of course, her previous album was house music. This album's country music. They're both really good albums. She has some good duets, like I mentioned with Miley Cyrus on here, but with lots of different people. But the Miley Cyrus one particularly stands out. So altogether, I think that this is a really, really good, very varied country pop album. It is a damn shame that Nashville decided to just ghost it. And that plus the behavior towards Shabuzi, whose song I don't even really like. But I'm still rooting for against them because it's better than the crap they put out most of the time. Is I think very telling. I think it's all very telling, and it's just not to say that all Nashville country music's bad, but yeah, I don't know. This is so much better than what's popular over there, and it's extremely embarrassing. And by there, I mean radio stations in particular. Sometimes it's not even the record industry that's the problem in country. It's the Nashville radio stations, is my understanding. But that whole sector of the music industry. So, Beyonce, her album is great. Nashville, the music industry, not the people of, sucks horribly. So that's all I gotta say. I'm gonna give it over to Matthew.
I thought this album was really good. Probably, yeah, it's just like a really, really good album. I think Ben basically spoke out to the cultural significance of this album for, Beyonce, the greatest pop singer of the 21st century, making a country album in her trilogy of albums that are basically reclaiming or reconnecting certain genres that had, black musical influence. First, it was house music. This is kind of country, and then supposedly the third album, which is going to be rock, which I hope happens. My favorite track of this album is Bodyguard, and then Most Wanted. I think, just a lot of really good stuff here, like American Requiem, Blackbird, 16 Carriages. Even if I'm not the biggest fan of it, Texas Hold'em, which is still good, I just prefer other Beyonce songs. I also like Levi Jeans and Ya, and which has a Beach Boys reference, which can't go wrong with that. And basically you can't go wrong with that. The only track I didn't really care for was Spaghetti, which isn't bad. It's just what I didn't really care for. But otherwise, this is a very good album. This is probably my third favorite Beyonce album. I think the first one is Lemonade, then it's Renaissance. Okay, maybe it's self-titled. I like self-titled more than this one, but anyway, it's in my top 5, and it's really, really good.
Fan.
Oh yeah, I have a brief
sorry.
comment on something that you said that I forgot to include.
Go ahead.
Not only does the song have a Beach Boys reference, right? She sings it in the way of Good Vibrations, the Beach Boys song. What lyrics does she sing? She sings the lyrics to Marky Mark's Good Vibrations. in the Beach Boys tune. It is. It's the combination of the Beach Boys. It's a pun in that sense. It's both the Beach Boys reference. Of course, the Beach Boys by Beach is excellent. With the Mocking Mark, who I think we all know who that is. The Mocking Mark Good Vibration song, which of course I think was a #1 hit. So it's like it's such a sweet sensation. So that I found that very funny at the time. I wonder how I forgot to mention that. Thank you, Matthew.
You're welcome.
Fan.
Okay, so first things first. I really this is before we get into any analysis of the actual album, but I thought that the way the songs were written out was super annoying. I thought it was pretty obnoxious that they're all cap locks and like at least half the I's with 2 in a row. I guess it's because this is Act 2 of a third-part thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out of your way to stylize it poorly. That really annoyed me. You know, I occasionally the cool things you can do with stylized things, like the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, with like the song "It," which is all lowercase italicized with the period at the end, but that kind of signifies the end of the journey. I just thought it looked really ugly, and I don't know. Do we start calling these songs like Black Batured? You know, I don't know. It was weird. I didn't like that. So, of course, this is a lot of people say this is a country album. I'm gonna say this is not a country album. I'm not gonna call it one. It has country songs. It does not make a country album. This is more of a look at American music through the lens of Beyonce, more Americana. Throughout that. Unfortunately, the thing I think is Beyonce is not the best tour guide for that. I mean, she's literally nicknamed Queen Bee. Her music is a lot about self-importance and how great she is. She isn't really one to make music about humility, which is why I think a look throughout American music through her lens kind of fails. She's not like Robert Hunter and Jerry Garcia, Donald Fagen, Walter Becker, Bruce Springsteen, who are really taking us throughout different parts of history of America with the songwritings and different parts of culture and walks of life. You know, Beyonce, it's pretty much all she knows is success. You know, she was like world famous, or at least nationally famous, before she was 18. You know, she's kind of an unreliable narrator because Beyonce is first and foremost about Beyonce. The cover of Jolene, you know, which is the big one, needs about 20 years of context about who Beyonce is and her character to even make it make sense. She's taking arguably the most famous country song of all time about a woman terrified of a beautiful goddess woman, and then makes it about how she's better than them. And throughout the record, there are about 5 plus distinct genres. You know, there's kind of AM, early 70s rock, which I actually really like those songs. Bodyguard, Alligator, Tears, things like that. There's obviously country. Daughter, I didn't really know a genre. It kind of sounded like movie trailer music. I know that's not really a thing, but that is really just what it sounded like to me. There's kind of gospel vibes, kind of coffee house type music. There's rap music. And the fact that you keep bringing up genre throughout the album is because they keep bringing up genre throughout the album. You know, that's kind of like multiple times in the album they bring up genre, which I think really screams insecurity, which is very odd for Beyonce. You know, she had the Lemonade album, but even then it isn't ultra insecure. The fact that I think it was at least twice they were like, oh, like this like genre is such a broad term, even though like it's such a small term, but it's really broad. It's like, oh, this song there's multiple genres. I thought that was extremely insecure. throughout the album. I mean, you show, don't tell. Telling screams insecurity. And now, I like genre splicing albums, you know? There's not an inherently bad thing, you know? Like, Picture of Nectar by Fish has a weird genre blending record, but, you know, there's still some amazing rock tunes that really kind of, hold it together. It's kind of like the glue. Sounds like Cavern, Chuck Dust Torture, things like that. Very much hold together. And most importantly, at the heart of Picture of Nectar is Fish. At its core, it's undeniably them. At its core, Cowboy Carter didn't really feel extremely Beyonce. It's definitely a Beyonce record, but it isn't like at its core it didn't feel like it was really her. Um, and with all of that being said, I don't think this is necessarily a terrible album. There are songs I enjoyed, you know, Bodyguard, Alligator Tears, I brought up before. Just for fun, I enjoyed a fair amount. I mean, whoever wrote Blackbird, they probably have a pretty big future in music. Whoever wrote that for her.
Who
It's
knows?
extremely well made, and it's over long. It isn't it isn't excess for the sake of excess. You know, she has a point that she's making with it. The main problem is the record. I think it fails to make that point. It kind of it misses with its mission statement. This is kind of the album equivalent of an essay that kind of misses the point of its own thesis.
Alright, well, I'm going to kind of, I guess, take a middle ground from the other viewpoints. First off, I do want to say, kind of directly address fans since he was last. And I was going to talk about this. I didn't know if anyone else was going to bring it up first, but I agree with Fan about Jolene. I thought it was very strange, you know, all the stuff about, you know, well, Jolene, I could easily understand why, Jolene, I could understand why you could easily take my man, that's in the original. Stuff like that, just the whole attitude of the song was changed. I'm not sure if it was exactly Beyonce's reasoning, what exactly her reasoning was. If it was just trying to make it a kind of stronger, less passive song, you know, for modern time, but it does kind of come across as just insecure on her wanting to do a cover of, you know, a famous song like Jolene, but then not wanting to sing about things that make her seem weak or vulnerable in any way. I don't know if that was her intention, but that's how it comes across, like fans said, and it's doubly ironic, her changing the lyrics of, please don't sleep with my husband to, I won't let you sleep with my husband, when her husband did cheat on her with another woman quite famously. You'd think, just metatextually, you would think that, maybe then it's not, that, her not willing to sing it, that's the reason. You think maybe she was, actually, maybe unironically did think that it was, maybe just a better song, maybe better for the times, maybe to try to make it seem more feminist. And so I think maybe Beyonce did actually think that and change it for that reason, and didn't change it just, you know, for any sort of personal reason or insecurity. But it's worth remembering that this is not a song from today. It's not a song for today's times. And the meaning just let's try and make it into one of these kind of like gold boss anthems. I think it really does kind of water it down and make it more generic in a lot of ways, you know. I mean, I think something that a lot of, especially producers these days, well, obviously that's not necessarily the case here on Beyonce, but in a lot of male producers, you saw it with Katy Perry, Woman's World. A lot of the times, we've kind of fallen into this trap of pop music and kind of as a social thing in general. This attitude that women have to have only strength, which isn't to say that there shouldn't be songs with women showing strength. There should, but I don't think, in the past, if women were pigeonholed into being weak, I don't think pigeonholing women into having to necessarily be strong all the time and any pop hit and everything trying to be an anthem for strong women and never being anything else. Not saying that this is necessarily a huge problem yet, but it's only starting to get there. I just think there should be a bit more room for a bit more variety, and I think making it well, every female artist is trying to have just these kind of, as I said, this is a bigger problem with Katy Perry more so than it is with Beyonce, but it is, I think, a problem with this cover of Jolene, trying to be a feminist anthem that comes from a place of strength and security. I think does make it a less special song, because there are a lot of people who've tried to do this sort of, feminist anthem that comes from a place of strength and security. And I will say, if you are going to make a feminist anthem that comes from a place of strength and security, it is probably better to write a new song that does that, as opposed to, now as I said, there are a lot of them now, we're kind of in a glut, but it is better, I think, to write a new song than to try to turn something else that wasn't, because Jolene originally wasn't necessarily a anthem for strength and security. It was a song about insecurity, ruling a relationship, desperation in a lot of ways, and just kind of association with original just makes this whole song seem very baffling, I feel. Decision to change the lyrics, the decision to cover it as such, because I think everyone knows the original lyrics. Everyone listening to this Beyonce version, there might be a few people who don't, but I think most people do. And so even if they are hearing this version, they are going to think about those original lyrics. And I don't know, maybe in 20 years' time or, 50 years' time, maybe Beyonce will be, still really well known, and maybe Dolly Parton may have faded a bit, although I kind of doubt it given it's Dolly Parton. But maybe people will look at this as just and forget it's a cover, but not anytime soon. Certainly not now. Certainly not when the album came out like 11 months ago. And yes, Ben says in chat, for those who can't see, Dolly Parton is God. And I will say, Dolly Parton, if not remembered for her music, she's done very extensive charity work. Her book thing, I'm sure, will probably live on long after her as well. So I don't think she's obviously going to fade from obscurity. Even her music, but also the book thing she does, where she gives out books to children. As for Jolene, basically, I thought covering it, probably in any capacity, even unaltered, probably wouldn't have been a good probably move for Beyonce. Beyonce obviously is very good at singing, so is Dolly Parton. At best, I think she could have maybe tied Dolly. I don't think she could have done a cover that really I would have ever wanted to listen to, particularly over the Dolly Parton version. And I think that's true for most people. Maybe not everyone, but I would imagine probably at least everyone here. As for with the changed lyrics, it just becomes kind of a head-scratching moment. If you're listening to this album, it just sort of takes you out of it. I feel like, you're listening to Beyonce, and Beyonce's doing this kind of fairly, rooted, good stuff. And, I did like this album. Spoiler alert, I guess. I'm not really to that point yet. But listening to stuff, you even had Blackboard, which I don't like this version of Blackboard nearly as much as the original. I didn't really care at all for this version of Blackboard. It's also very uncanny, as someone who's like a big fan of the Beatles, to hear the same backing on this version, because it's like you expect with every line you expect it to be said by Paul, and it's not. It's said by Beyonce, and it's sung by Beyonce, and it's just I don't know, a little awkward for me, but I did think she did a pretty good job on that. I feel like it was a much more worthy cover than Jolene, but I wasn't too hot on the covers on this album. At least the ones I recognize were covers. Maybe some of these were covers and I don't know the original, but as for Jolene, I think Jolene kind of stands as a big head-scratching moment on this album. It, I think, very much is the weak link. Even the songs that'll, I guess, theoretically worsen it, don't particularly make you scratch your head and say, you know, why did she do that, or what did, you know, just, you know, album tracks. But the version of Jolene, just, you get to that and you're just like, huh? 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 And I just, it does stand as, I feel like this album would have been better without that. Keep Blackboard, don't necessarily keep Jolene. As for the rest of the album, I'm sorry if I went off on Jolene a little too long there, but a fan was talking about it, and so I wanted to talk about it. So, anyways, the album I did like. American Requiem, that's really good. 16 Carriages, Texas Hold'em, of course. One of my favorite songs from last year. Bodyguard, which is actually my favorite song of the album, not Texas Hold'em. Even though it looks like on Spotify, because I just have track listing up on Spotify, actually there's a big gap between them in streams, and I feel like that's unfortunate, because I feel like they should be pretty close. I feel like they're pretty close in terms of quality. Bodyguard's great. You also have the song with Miley, that's Two Most Wanted. And, you know, Ya was pretty good too. The last track, Amen, that also, I think, works as a very good album closer. Two Hands to Heaven, that one I liked as well. There's a lot of good stuff going on here. Even the weaker tracks I didn't necessarily name, I think will generally work pretty well in an album format. I'm not as excited about the intermissions. I know Fan said that they seem kind of pretentious, and I will say I think Fan is right. They make too big of a deal about genre. I don't know how big of a deal. I mean, clearly, genre was in her mind when she made these songs, but I just don't know how tacked on at the end these intermissions were, like when they were stuck in there. I mean, a lot of ways, you know, a big part of the advertising for this album revolves around, you know, it's got Willie Nelson and Dolly Parton and stuff making cameos. I kind of like the Willie Nelson ones better, but I still feel like they're kind of pointless. I've never been a big fan of these, like, talking intermissions on albums in general. Throwback to our Outcast, when we did Stankonia, that was a video, and me and Fan, I remember, both said we thought it really screwed up the pacing. Not as severe here as it was there, but still, and Ben says in chat that Stankonia is a great album, and that is true, but it does have pacing problems, I feel like, because of the, at times, over lengthy intermissions. They're luckily not too long here, though, on Cowboy Corridor, but I do feel like they give it kind of an air of pretentiousness, like, because that clearly wasn't the intention. Like, clearly, like, Smoke Out with Willie Nelson was supposed to kind of have this thing as kind of a laid-back, tongue-in-cheek thing, but all the talk about genre, and all the talk about, you know, blah, 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 you know, it does come across as a gimmick in a lot of ways, was it would have come across as a lot less of a gimmick, I think, if they hadn't have done that. And that's sort of a problem, in my opinion, with the album, but of course you can just skip those. We're in the age of streaming, and, you know, it's not like you're having to guess with a needle on a record, or you're risking, you know, twisting up your tape, fast forwarding, or whatever. I mean, you can skip those. You could just listen to the songs in a playlist without them, you know, and so it's not that big of a deal, but we do look at things in album format, so I do think it was worth mentioning. So, yeah, there's something else I was gonna say. Oh yeah, Fan said this was Americana, not country, and I think it varies from song to song to some degree, but overall, I would still call the album country. We did a while back, that was Casey Musgrave's Golden Owl. Good album. I liked that album, actually. I think maybe I liked that album more than anyone else here. I mean, maybe Matthew liked it as much or more than me, but I feel like I liked that one more than Ben. Ben hadn't joined us yet at that time, sadly, so he doesn't know that episode, but that album, I'm listening to that album and thinking, this isn't much country, this is really just pop. It was good pop, but it wasn't, Golden Hour, yeah, but it wasn't really much pop in my, much country in my opinion. It was mostly pop. It was country pop, yes, but it was country pop, the category of pop. So I guess maybe it was pop country and not country pop. As for Beyonce, I feel like something like Texas Hold'em was definitely more country than any song on Golden Hour. Maybe that's to its benefit, maybe it's to its detriment. But I will say this was at least more fully country than Golden Hour. And I like Golden Hour, but... And maybe using it as a benchmark isn't the best thing. But, that is an album we've done previously on the Album Club. I don't listen to much country. I did listen to this Beyonce album when it came out because Beyonce, you know. I don't really listen to much country in general, especially modern country. Older country is a bit better. Fan, I mean, I think he does have a point with Americana, but I will still call this country because if Golden Hour counts as country, and this is more country than Golden Hour, then surely this must count as country. And I guess for Cowboy Carter, we can maybe put its genre down as country, Americana. So, you know, both. I mean, it can be, I think, more than one at the same time. And I feel like maybe focusing on the genre a little too much is kind of a mistake, both on our part and on Beyonce's part, and, well, especially with intermissions, as I said. So, if we also saw criticizing maybe the album for focusing a little too much on genre, I'm going to take that a little step forward. I want to say maybe we are also focusing a little bit too much on genre. So, but yeah, it's country, it's Americana, kind of varies from song to song, more or less country, but it's both, I would say. And it can be pop too, I think. As the part of it, it can be country, it can be Americana, it can be pop. I think it's all these things at once. And in a lot of ways, I think it's better for it. If it just wasn't a little too on the nose about it in the intermissions, I think its mixing of genres probably would have been at least perfectly blended, even if it's... I'm not saying it's a perfect album. There's some albums I like a lot more than this one, but I still think the whole genre blend did generally work very, very well. It was just a little too on the nose with the intermissions at times, but for the most part, I do feel like it worked quite well. So I believe Ben wanted to speak after me. I spoke for a long time, so he may not remember what he had to say. But Ben, you did want to speak.
Yeah, I do remember what I want to say. It's aimed at both you and Fan. I think I agree with Fan more than your points on Jolene. I mean, there were lots of points here. So it's kind of hard to get through all of them. So I'm not going to try. But on the topic of Jolene, I do think it's worth noting, one, that she has done a pretty good reference the incident at the opening of the song. It's the intermission, Dolly P. It's the opening to Jolene. And give me a second. So after that intermission, right, it's invoked. And that is interesting. And I do think means that, Chris, you talked about this kind of gold bossness of this song. And that's true in some sense, but I also think it's not true. Really. Right? That it is more, as fans said, a very insecure song. Right? It's not just a change to the song to make it more gold bossy, though it is. And that's because Queen Bee, it's making it more Queen Bee. Alright? In some ways that actually predates gold bossness, will postdate gold bossness. It is Beyonce. I give example of Single Ladies because that's my favorite Beyonce song, but we can think of any number of Beyonce songs from the 2000s that are like that. They all go hard, they're all great. I don't know, Single Ladies has just been on my mind a lot. Even before Cowboy Carter was picked, Matthew could confirm that he and I will discuss Single Ladies pretty regularly.
Ben says that single ladies.
Single Ladies.
He says that single.
Is a
He says that single ladies have been on his mind. Well, I'm glad you're not going after married women.
man. Also, Single Ladies is one of the best pop songs of the 2000s. And anyone who thinks that it's one of the worst ones is out of their mind.
Wait, who said that?
Oh, no one you know. But it was an
Thank
opinion
God.
that me and Ben have talked about for a minute, and it bewilders us that a song as iconic as Single Ladies was one of the worst pop songs of that year.
Well,
that's all I'll have to say.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm just saying, Matthew. Whoever it was who said that, don't pay him any attention.
Yeah. Anyway. What I was gonna say about Single Ladies. Single Ladies. I remember liking that song when it came out, and I was barely paying attention to pop music then because I was a kid. I was like, this is a good song. This goes hard. And did just alone, but there's one person. There's just one person that's like, Single Ladies is one of the worst songs of the 2000s. It's just an insane opinion. Anyway, but no, I'm just using Single Ladies as an example. So Beyonce is trying to capture that with her cover of Jolene and her mojo with Tammy Wynette, "Stand by Your Man," which is a song that I do not like particularly. I mean, like, it sounds nice, but like, it was probably overhated at the time. But anyway, but I do think that fan is right that a lot of this album is actually quite insecure. I find that kind of interesting though, but I can see why it could turn some people off. Like, I think that they're all legitimate poppers with this album. This constant invocation of genre does seem insecure. I think Beyonce is insecure about her relationship to country music. I think that the inclusion of Willie Nelson, even though I like hearing his voice and him talking about smoking weed, is pleasant. I mean, he's there to give her the endorsement. Dolly Parton is there to give her the endorsement. All of this could have talked about genre. One time, of course, it's there just to signal that they're doing spaghetti, which does not, despite having Shabuzi on it, does not sound like country at all. In fact, it sounds more like Megan Thee Stallion than anything else. But I do think that there was some insecurity about her relationship with country music. That is real rooted in race, unfortunately. Which is, of course, not Beyonce's fault. If she's having to deal with that, it is walking through that is... And she's, I mean, in some ways, I think she does make a good use of this, though. Like, this album is quite insecure, but I think that makes it... She utilizes it in a way that was unexpected and better on some other songs. Like, fans said it's hard for Beyonce to be humble, and I think that that's true as Queen Bee. But I do think on songs like American Requiem, the song After Jolene Daughter, but actually throughout this album, she deals with this kind of, I mean, like I said, her relationship to her father, I found to be, its invocation in this, I think is one, both a good use of this more humble Americana music. And I believe this can be a little bit more varied than just country music. I'll give that to Fan. But I think that the kind of combination of insecurity with Nashville with the kind of Americana humbleness, even if she, as Fan said, maybe not be the best guide to that. She's an interesting guide to it, and it allows a ritual portrait, a kind of a more Freudian portrait. Even if that's kind of stereotyped, I don't think it has to do with that psychosexual stuff with her father, thankfully. But like her relationship to her parents, how that shaped her, how it shaped her personality. I think it allows a more psychological album of Beyonce, even if that could be kind of iffy with like how Jolene plays out, or with kind of insecurity with genre. I think that she actually does harness the insecurity in this album, to let's explore Americana itself and more use Americana to explore her. Like, other than Lemonade, this is the only album of Beyonce's. I'm like, does Beyonce the person and not just the performer? Of course, she's obviously still a performer on this. She cannot let the performer go. The performer is a part for Queen Bee is a part of herself. Maybe she should have let it go more on Jolene. Once again, Jolene is not my favorite song on this album by any means. I am deeply ambiguous on it because it's like I don't really think it's. I mean, at least it's not a straight cover, but it's difficult because, as Fang just said in chat, Queen Bee and Beyonce Knowles are two different people. I feel like I get more of Beyonce Knowles on this album than on any other full albums besides Lemonade. But it's in this ambiguous relationship in a way that it's not as much on Lemonade, which then means what? It can mean some good things, and it can mean some kind of iffy things, or like iffy execution. So I'll give Fan a lot of credit on that point, and Chris to the extent that he made that point too. On Blackboard, I'll agree that it uses the instrumental of the original Blackboard, and that could be, I guess, a little disorienting at first. I thought that cover was great. Like, that is one of my favorite songs on the album. I like that original instrumental, obviously. It is kind of an odd choice to just straight use it, but I think it works well. Beyonce is a good singer, I think, to sing that song. I think I benefited from that. That song obviously does have this kind of civil rights implication. There is a slightly more political approach to this album, not in terms of like explicit or high politics. But of this kind of walking through race and culture on this album, that Blackboard is a very country sounding, like country influenced song, even if its style is actually Donovan's ultimately. It's more folk than country, and folk was always better on this. But I mean, we could go for hours discussing that. But I think Blackboard was a good pick. I was glad to hear it. And I think it does allow her to kind of get a little bit of an angle on that. Also, it's just a great song. The original Blackboard is a 10 out of 10 song. She covers it well. She's a great singer. I don't know. It worked well for me. But yeah, I'll agree that there's a lot of weirdness on this album. I can see why it could be off-putting. But I also think it does have kind of a value to it in its weirdness. But yeah, I'll agree with Fan's characterization that this is an insecure album.
Oh, wait, Fan, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we pretty much agree on almost everything. I mean, there's aren't many things that that Ben just said that I necessarily disagree with. I think he certainly Ben thinks is a more interesting record than I do. Not that I don't think it's interesting, but because I do, I think it's certainly a look into where she is right now, which is in a pretty insecure place. I guess I didn't think it was, but I mean, this isn't really the kind of music I generally listen to, so there's always going to be a bit of, aspect of, I don't know. I don't know the word I'm trying to think of, but there's always going to be some level of, not disinterest, because you're always interested in finding new music, but it's always not going to be as high level as finding some new, like, prog album or something I've never heard. But I do pretty much agree with everything Ben said. Apathy is not a bad choice. That's a good word for it. But the I think the one thing that I really like to bring up also that I didn't is that I think a lot about, because this is really Beyonce singing and this is her take. The one thing I would like, if we could somehow see, like, if we could remove Beyonce's face and voice on this record and put on somebody else, how successful would this be? Because this is definitely kind of a lore record, as is a lot of Beyonce things. Like I said, Beyonce is a character that has lore and lots of it. And now I know she is a person, but this is also, like I said, kind of a character. So if we could find like somebody who put out one kind of mildly successful album and then did this and didn't really change anything, I think that this would be viewed radically differently. And that isn't me saying is a bad thing necessarily. I think it would just be a fascinating look at what would this look like if somebody else did this. That had the ability to promote on as high of a level as she did. That's one thing that I thought about a lot while listening to this was, let's say we just got someone else to do this, because this is very much driven by it being Beyonce.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the answer to what Van said is, would this be anyone else successful if it was somebody's, maybe second album in the public eye or something like that? Somebody that maybe people would start streaming it. Would it stay relevant? Would people still be listening to it years later? I think the answer is probably not. It probably wouldn't be that successful. I think a lot of this album, obviously, its success, people are actually even listening to it, giving this kind of style a chance, is chalked up to Beyonce's, of course, part fame. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, though. I do think giving people kind of a wider variety of styles, whole fans, and giving them the ability to maybe listen to and get into something different, kind of a weird melting pot, using whole fame and kind of roles a pre-established artist to do that, is probably a good thing. I think it's definitely a good thing. And I actually think that's something very good Beyonce did that I do think was worth bringing up. Ben wishes to respond to that, so we're going to him.
Yeah. I do think that thinking about Beyonce's broader project as Matthew described it, reclamation of music that was influenced by Black people that has become very right. And putting it in relationship to Renaissance, right, which is concerned with house music, which is of course very important to the LGBT community. I think that in both cases, well, I do think Beyonce people probably be more inclined to listen to house than country. We've been thinking about Beyonce going to country and Beyonce's relationship to country. But I think it's also worth thinking about this as Beyonce
bringing country.
But
yeah, you said you've been thinking about it as Beyonce going to country, but maybe it's better to think about it as Beyonce bringing country to her audience.
Yes, I think that is clearly powerful intent, and especially with Renaissance too, was to try to bring. House is not obscure neighbor's country. Country is more siloed off in house music relative to like pop, but trying to bring in these other influences. And we saw this. We saw this with Renaissance. I think pretty clearly with house music. That as Beyonce's album started hitting down the pipeline in just a few days before its release, Drake was like, "Uh-oh, I have to release house music." my house music song as the lead single for my album. Now that song is not very good because it's Drake doing house music, but in 2020's Drake doing house music. Matthew just said in text that that album was a 2-pack of ass.
Two cheeks. Two cheeks.
That is true. Yes, that is just true. And I do think Beyonce going country has been important. Obviously, this album has been significant. It has been since Old Town Road an increased interest in black people in music, which is good.
In country music.
Country music.
Yeah, not in music in general, in country music.
I don't like Kane Brown's hit from last year, but it is. I like it. I think it was less bad than some other hits, some country hits from last year, but I don't really care that much for Kane Brown. Shabuzi, I'm glad to see winning. I think the Shabuzi song would be popular even without Cowboy Kotal, but it definitely gave him a bump while he's on here. And that combined with his song getting popular on. Actually, I don't know how his song got popular, but if I had to guess, it'd probably be TikTok. I guess I should look into that. But
I'll just
the Bumble song plus Cowboy Kotal, I do think is a good trend in country, even if the continued success of a Wall song Tipsy continues to kind of baffle me why it's just that popular. They're both well made. I find Cowboy Kotal a lot more interesting than Shabuzi's song. But I do think that they're both a good trend in country music. So, but one that country music is doing their damnedest to resist. So that sucks. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about broadening of a country audience. Now, the country audience has broadened a lot. 2023, for instance, was a year in which country dominated the #1 spot. Yeah. With Morgan Wallen's Last Night, which is like one of the biggest songs of all time. I've heard it like twice. It's very boring, kind of like punny. As Matthew just said, that was also a 2-pack of ass. We also had then that weird country folk song about that random person, Richmond off of Richmond. And we also had Jason Aldean's song, This Ain't My Like, well, I don't remember his name, that was racist. Tried that in a small town. And then, of course, also in the cover of Fast Call, which of the country songs that were popular 2023 isn't as good. That one is good. That's because Fast Call is good, and it's a very straight, normal cover of Fast Call. I still listen to the regular Fast Call instead of that, but
I don't listen to the cover at all.
Yeah, I mean, if a cover comes on, it's like, yes, that's Fast Call. And Fast Call is a great song, and that's a good cover of it. There's lots of covers of Fast Call, so
me when I'm watching Pixels Calls, whenever Lightning McQueen comes on screen. Yes, that's Fast Call. That's Fast Call. Let's go.
Also, I mean, it is worth noting. Now we're on Fast Call, right? This also has to do with black women in country music. I've had Fast Call recently reached the billion in the past few days. But anyway, yes, country music has been really big recently. Country music has been really big recently, and in some ways, maybe Beyonce is not needed to bring it to her audience. Even this, I mean, 2024 and 2023 were both dominated the subsets of the chart by country music. So 2024 less so of a Billboard song. But I do think in terms of like opening it up beyond like there's this weird cultural clash thing going on in the Billboard chart. Because once again, I don't think anybody here has heard the Morgan Wallen song more than a few times. But I think Beyonce is important to opening it up. I just like Old Town Road was important to opening it up. That's my opinion, at least. So I think that this does a good job of that, but there's some question of how necessary it was, but in the end, I'll side on how it's still important. Especially if I'm providing to for Shabuzi over Morgan Wallen. Anyway, go ahead, Chris.
Ben said that country music's been very popular recently, and maybe Beyonce fans didn't need it brought to them. But Beyonce's fans, I think, everyone really, not just Beyonce's fans, probably did need someone to bring to them, not necessarily country music or popular country music, but rather country music that doesn't suck ass, like Morgan Wallen. And so I feel like Beyonce was at least maybe helping show that not all country sounds like that, and not all country sucks, and not all country is by these just kind of generic, mediocre, white racist men.
Also, I want to tag on real quick one thing. Also, Beyonce bringing country to people is not a bad thing, because even if you know, you think people would really like country, and it's very popular, it's very easy to dissociate from anything you don't want to be a part of these days. Like, there is really hardly anything that's so big that you have to pay attention to it. So, like, a Beyonce fan might not be listening to country because you can just curate whatever you want to listen to at any point in time, and you never really have to go out of your way to not listen to something. This isn't 1983, where even if you hate Michael Jackson, you know every single song off of Thriller because you've heard every single song off of Thriller a million times. You can very much curate what you want to hear these days. So I do think her bringing country music to her audience is certainly going to convert people who hardly even know who Morgan Wallen is, because it's very possible. We're all music people here, but it's very easy to isolate.
Yeah, fan is right, especially like in the age of the internet where everyone lives in their bubbles, in a way. It is very easy, especially with these streaming services that have such a wide variety of stuff, some big known, some more obscure, for somebody to only listen to. Like, for instance, I know a lot of people online who only listen to prog rock, or primarily listen to prog rock, and shout out to Fan to an extent, although he's at least not one of the major offenders in that regard. Sorry, Fan. But
I wear that with pride.
alright. Yeah, and so some of them they listen to this really obscure stuff you've never heard of before they get to something big that you have heard of. So some of these people, they've listened to something like this is a prog rock album someone was recommending to me. I don't remember what's name, but it was some guy in the 90s or something, and it was about like him overcoming alcoholism or something. And Fan may or may not know what I'm talking about. It wasn't him who recommended it to me, I know, but they may well have, some of these people may have heard of that before they have heard of something like Die With a Smile. That's currently at number one as of when we're filming. So, like, but yeah, so, like, it's very easy. If you wanted a niche to go off, like, for a long time, I was mostly stuck in, like, 60s, 70s, rock, and I mean, that's my favorite type of music, but I have been listening to kind of modern music, and, I have been trying to pay attention at least to electronic stuff. I haven't listened to every album. Of course, I knew Beyonce as a child, that when she was big, that was still kind of before it had become so truly fragmented by the internet.
So even then, I had never heard of Die With a Smile. Die With a Smile until just now, and I'm trying to keep my ear to the ground and knowing what's out right now. But at the same time, I want to listen to avant-garde music from the '90s and the '70s, and that's just awesome to me.
Yeah, you just have to find the time to do it. Try to walk in both. I mean, I think being well rounded is good, but I also think doing deep dives is good. So I think it was good that Beyonce tried to bring country to an audience, and also good country and not just bad country. And I think we all agree with that. I think everyone here has kind of ran out of things to say now at this point. We have talked about Cowboy Coral for a long, long time, and that's partly because it's a very, very modern, very recent album, and we've talked about it a lot more than Sun Ra, obviously. So we're going on to what album we like better. So if anyone have anything else to say about Cowboy Coral, I don't really think any of you did, but I am starving. I have not had lunch yet, and people keep saying the word spaghetti or talking about Beyonce, and it messes with my mind. So, which album we like better? We're starting with you, Ben. Which one of these albums did you like better?
Well, I had heard Heliocentric was the Sun Wall before, and it is a really good album. It's a really good album to study to. I will almost certainly listen to it again. I have to go with Cowboy Coral. Despite the flaws that we talked.
Okay, well, since Ben is currently indisposed, and he has technically already voted, we will be going on to you, Matthew.
Cowboy Carter.
Thank you. Fan?
I'm gonna go with Sangha. Well, I think it's despite a little lack of discussion, I think that's really suits the nature of the album, and I think it's a must listen.
Right. Ben, have you fixed your mic and have anything else to say?
Okay, so just to be clear, I was voting for Cowboy Coral, but both albums are quite good. And despite its flaws, Cowboy Coral I found to be a very interesting album. And yeah, I liked it better.
Okay, and as for me, I'm going to kind of take my cue from Ben. Somehow I did like. It's not really my style of music, and neither really is Cowboy Coral, but it is, I think, a very interesting and very textured album. And similarly, I think it's interesting, and I think certainly to its credit that someone as far into their career, as popular as Beyonce is still turning out these very experimental, very interesting, and very textured albums like this. So I'm voting for Cowboy Coral. I thought it was really good. It is a little uneven in places. I clearly did not like the cover of Jolene, as I'm sure if you've listened to this point of the video know, since we talked about that a whole lot. But I really did like Cowboy Coral overall as a whole. So now we're going on to who picked what. Well, Cowboy Coral won, by the way. I forgot to say that, but obviously me, Ben, and Matthew all voted for it, so it was 3-1. No hate to Sunwell, though. I do like Sunwell. And Fan, of course. I like Fan, too, so shout out to Fan for voting for Sunwell. Alright, anyways, now time for who picked what. Sorry if I'm a bit scatterbrained here, but it really has been a long time, and I am actually quite hungry, So, as for who picked what, anyone want to guess who picked what album? No?
I'm gonna guess Matthew picked Cowboy Carter and Ben picked Sangha.
Fan picked the summer album.
Alright, well, what Fan said is roughly right, more or less. More so. Sunwell was picked by Ben, not Fan. And it's my understanding that when this album came up, I believe Fan was thrown for a bit of a loop because I don't think expected anyone except for himself to pick Sunwell. Right, Fan?
Yeah. My first thought was, I didn't put this in, did I? And then all week I've been like, I didn't put that in. And then I was like, it had to be Ben, because nobody else could have possibly heard of this guy.
Yeah, me and Matthew definitely wouldn't have done it. It's pretty strange even Ben did, but me and Matthew definitely wouldn't have. Certainly not me. Alright, as for Cowboy Coral, Fan was kind of right. Matthew did pick Cowboy Coral. Ben also picked Cowboy Coral. So, and clearly I had heard it before too. It wasn't one of my picks, but Ben and Matthew had both submitted it as a submission to the list. so it does count as both of their submission. So, Fan was mostly right, but he just didn't get there. It was picked by more than one person. Alright, well that about wraps it up. On another great episode of the Album Club, I believe our longest episode to date. I think almost certainly longest episode to date. So I hope you all really did enjoy it. I do feel like this album, Cowboy Corridor, was really worth kind of delving deep into, especially as a very recent album, but also as a very textured, very kind of layered album. As with Sunwa, probably didn't do him as much justice as we could have, but I think Fan was right. You really did have to kind of just listen to it to kind of get it. It was very, you kind of had to get the vibes. Anyways, though, once again, please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this sort of analysis. This was certainly a very weird pairing, just apples to oranges, as I said earlier. And oftentimes we do stuff like that. Sometimes we do apples to apples. Sometimes we do apples to cherries. Sometimes we do oranges to tomatoes. And sometimes we do tomatoes to carrots. And sometimes, just sometimes, we do carrots to plums. So you could tell I'm hungry because I'm just rambling about food now. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.